January the 28th, 2008. The head of one of Britain's most elusive crime families arrives to be sentenced. Together, Olive, Sean and George Greenhalgh had become the most successful forgers in history.
As a family group, it was brilliant.
Their fakes ranged across all types of art and were so spectacular that one was even shown to the Queen. Using police interviews and unseen footage, this film enters the Greenhalgh home and for the first time tells the family's incredible story.
They were living almost in a different period of time. It was all quite unusual.
Remarkably, most of their fakes were made in their garden shed, using tools they'd bought from B&Q.
What do you think, George, about what happened today?
There'll be something done about it, don't worry.
Welcome to the strange world of the Artful Codgers, the most unlikely master criminals the world has ever seen.
It's quite an incredible story. I doubt if I'll ever get to the bottom of it.
It was here, in a modest council house on the outskirts of Bolton, that the Greenhalghs set off on a 17-year crime spree that would leave the art world reeling. Their first attempt to con the art world was back in the autumn of 1990. They'd faked a painting by a Scottish artist called Samuel Peploe that could have fetched as much as £50,000 and taken it to one of London's top art dealers in Piccadilly.
They arrived here at 6 or 6:30 in the evening. Because it was late, I tried to persuade them to leave the painting and let me think about it. And of course they won't do that.
Were they giving you the hard sell, would you say?
It's not necessarily the hard sell, it's the wind-up sell. You know, it's, well, if you don't have to buy it, it'll go to your rival. You know, it's using everybody against you, and you're keen to have good pictures. I mean, it's always a turn-on. You have to really throw a bucket of cold water over yourself before you do these deals. I decided to buy the picture. I thought, well, wow, this is a stonking Peploe. They asked me £15,000 for it. And I said, for whatever reason, I'll give you 20, because I thought it was too cheap. This was a result. They wanted 15 grand, they had £20,000 for something knocked up in the back shed.
When did you realise you'd been had?
That night. Sometime, because I do wake up in the middle of the night, or quite often, and I just thought, I don't think that picture's genuine.
In the morning, Peter Nahum had the picture analysed and discovered it was recently painted. It was supposed to date from the 1930s.
So with that knowledge, I immediately telephoned the police, then rang the family, George, whose immediate reaction was that he was going to sue me. Well, I simply told him that he could sue me if he liked. And if he wanted to know where the evidence was, it was in the hands of the police.
At the time, Scotland Yard had just 2 officers covering art fraud for the whole country. The Peploe was one of dozens of cases they were dealing with.
I then received a phone call from a woman saying she was Mrs. Greenhalgh, asking what we were going to do about her picture, that it was genuine, she wanted it back, and so on. And really, I think she was clearly trying to see whether she could expect a knock on the door from the police at any time.
The police didn't pursue the family because they thought the painting was a one-off forgery. The that 17 years later the Greenhalghs would be exposed as master criminals who'd fooled some of the world's top auction houses, art galleries and museums. George, the 84-year-old father of the family, was the salesman behind the operation. The fakes he'd sold were worth millions.
You see, what I've done with all these things that are valuable, I've asked people who are in the know. Yes. He said there were thousands and thousands of dollars.
His 83-year-old wife, Olive, helped procure the documents that convinced the experts that the fakes were real. Police suspect they sold over 120 forgeries.
Does your husband conduct any sort of art business, buying and selling of works of art?
No.
To your knowledge, he's never bought or sold any art, antiques or antiquities?
Not to my knowledge.
All of the fakes were made by their middle-aged son, Sean, a self-taught genius who'd never had a job and spent his whole life at home with his parents.
To tell you the truth, I've been absolutely amazed that they fooled anybody because they wouldn't fool me. It seems crazy, doesn't it?
We wouldn't believe it from a council house, would you? I've known the family for, what, 40 odd years. Yeah.
How would you describe them?
Well, funny family.
The neighbours know little about the Greenhalghs, even though the families lived in the same house since the estate was built in the 1950s. George was a caretaker at the local technical college. Olive worked in the nappy factory.
Yeah, they just seem really respectable. You know, just going about their own business day to day. And you just wouldn't think at all that they were capable of doing it.
Yes, they were like ghosts within the community, let's put it that way. That they flitted in and out. You saw them here, you saw them there, and then they'd just disappear and back into their own world.
Having avoided arrest, the Greenhalghs got busy plotting more forgeries. They'd learned from their previous mistake, and the next piece would be so convincing that it would end up on display in the country's greatest museum. After surviving their first brush with the law, the Greenhalghs moved on from fake paintings to bogus antiquities. They ranged from ancient Egypt to Anglo-Saxon Britain, and were all made by their son, Sean, who was on his first steps to becoming the most diverse forger in history.
Hobbies. Can we just discuss a little bit about any hobbies or clubs that you're involved in?
Yeah, I've had an interest in art.
You taken any courses or been in any colleges or
no
anything like that?
No, not taking anything else. I didn't take art at school even. Bit boring, aren't I?
Having left school at the age of 16, Sean taught himself how to fool the experts by visiting his local libraries.
So here we have Sean Greenhalgh's registration card. He's put down his subject interest as art history, his address, Bromley Cross, Bolton.
He'd cooked up a plan